My mom used to have very confronting conversations with the local pastor. He would say to my mom, "Betty, when are you going to stop smoking those cigarettes?" And she would look at him and say, "Preacher Bill, when are you going to stop overeating at the church dinners?" It was her way, and maybe his too, of keeping the floor level so that nobody was outside the realm of Paul's letter to the Romans. Paul said a little later in the chapter that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Paul is all about identifying the reality that exists throughout the human race. Regardless of what faith tradition, regardless of what culture we come from, it's clearly recognizable that the human condition is that human beings are prone to err. And in their erring, they hurt themselves and they hurt one another. What's that old expression that goes like this? People who live in glass houses, that's right, should not throw stones. The reality is that it's so easy to see what's wrong with everybody else that we forget sometimes that each one of us have our shortcomings and our faults. And this passage from Romans is a clear reminder to us that there is no one that is standing in perfect righteousness before God, not even one. We all have hurts, we all have hang-ups, and we all have habits. Now, the word hurt implies that because sin is such a pervasive problem in our society, there are people, and including us, who have been the victims of sin. I want you to see clearly now 9 areas that are a part of Celebrate Recovery. It says that with relationship to Celebrate Recovery, these are just 9 of the first suggested areas. People who suffer from alcoholism or sexual abuse or domestic violence or drug addiction or food addiction or gambling addiction or have gone through a divorce or are struggling with codependency or sexual addiction or anything else. And then written into each one of these hurts, hang-ups, and habits is the whole understanding that there is someone who has committed a hurt and there is someone who has received a hurt. And we need to be aware of this reality. There's a famous verse of poetry that was around several years ago, and I looked it up. It's still out there on the web. It goes like this. It says, a young couple moved into a new neighborhood, and the first morning while they're eating breakfast, the young woman looks at her new neighbor across the way from her in her backyard who's hanging up her wash on the line for it to dry. The woman says to her husband that morning at breakfast, "That laundry is not very clean." She said she doesn't know how to wash correctly. Perhaps she needs another type of laundry soap. The husband looked on, but he remained silent. Every time her neighbor would hang up the wash, the young woman would make the same comment. Then about a month later, the woman was surprised to see that the wash on the line was clean. And she said to her husband, "Look, honey, she's learned how to wash correctly. I wonder who taught her this." The husband said, "My dear, I got up early this morning and washed our windows." What we see while watching others depends on the purity of the window through which we look. The truth of the matter is, we all have dirty laundry, and we all have dirty windows, and we all need to do some cleaning. How's that going to happen? It's going to happen because we reach out in concern and compassion to one another. The establishment of small groups, the establishment of an intentional effort to help people who go through these 9 things and many others as well, to support them and help them to get through it. When Reva and I started pastoring after our marriage, we were assigned to a 2-point charge outside of Durham, North Carolina, in the little town of Roxborough. And there was a couple in Lee's Chapel Church named John and Janie Hester. And as we got closer to John and Janie and were in a small group study with them, one night John told this story several years ago when Jane and I were much younger. We had twin boys. One day they went down to the pond, and I was close by and was keeping an eye on them, but they got out in that pond playing in the water. And what nobody knew was that in the bottom of that pond was this really mucky substance. And these little boys got down into the muck, and it got hold of them, and it began to pull them even more. And John realized, and he was getting to them to pull them out. And this is what he said. He said, Reva, I used all the might I had in my arms and my legs, everything I possibly could, and I could not retrieve my boys out of that pond, and they died. They died there that day in that pond, both of his boys. How does a human being ever get over something like that? How? I can't imagine a hurt any deeper in life. Everybody has hurts and hang-ups and habits, and the goal of the Christian faith is to pull us together to love and support each other through the most difficult times of our lives. And to recognize that as long as this world continues, we're going to go through some really tough stuff, and we need each other. This is what the church is supposed to be. I know the church is a place that we come to worship, and we have this tremendous praise team, and we have tremendous programming for our youth and our children, and I know that's all good and well and what it's supposed to be. But I'm telling you, until we find a way to organize ourselves in such a way to help one another get through the most terrible, disgusting, awful times of our life, we're not fully being the church. This is what I believe, my friends, that God's love never stops trying to reach us in this world. In spite of our sin, in spite of our failures, God is with us. Do you believe that? Do you believe that? Then I urge you to continue to pray and support and hope and get involved as much as possible with Celebrate Recovery, because it's the kind of program that helps the church be everything that God has always intended it to be. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen.